Hey, Shama, welcome to the show.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So if you haven't met Shama yet, Shama Hyder is the best-selling author of several books, including Momentum, How to Propel Your Marketing and Transform Your Brand in the Digital Age. She is the award-winning CEO of the Marketing Zen Group, a global online marketing and digital PR company. It's great to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so tell us about your background, how you got started in marketing and digital marketing.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually never thought that I would go into digital marketing. So I guess in some ways I'm an accidental marketer, accidental entrepreneur. But I got my start very early, right out of grad school, did my thesis on Twitter when I had a few thousand users. And at a time where social media wasn't an accepted thing, it wasn't a field, it wasn't an industry. In fact, jobs in the industry didn't really exist because the industry didn't exist. And hence I got my start as an entrepreneur because I felt like there was something there that even though people couldn't see it yet, it was just a matter of time before, it caught up to them.
Cool. So what did you see in that kind of early stage Twitter with a couple thousand users? Like where did you see that promise there?
Well, I mean, you could already tell, even just with a few thousand users, how it was shaping the internet in such a big way. And, it's just sad that I think Twitter sort of lost its way right now, but I'm hoping with new leadership and things, they'll be able to change that in the future. But yeah, the big shift for me looking at Twitter then was just seeing how it allowed people to communicate, to connect with each other. And that was just, that was something very different. I mean, you could see, one of the first, for example, user bases of Twitter was 7th grade teachers all over the country who were teaching evolution and trying to figure out how to introduce a sensitive subject into the classroom. And you could just, within that little microcosm, you could see the power for amazing things to happen as it, brought.
Very cool. So where did your kind of career go from there?
Well, funnily enough, after I wrote the thesis, I thought I would try to go get a job. So big thing was to try and go work with maybe one of the consulting firms. So I thought I would do the Bain McKinsey route. Except again, it was so new. People would say, what's Twitter? Facebook's something for my kids. I don't really understand. Social media in general was such a new thing. And I think digital marketing overall was just it's such a nascent stages. And so I think what's interesting is when I realized that those opportunities weren't open, I decided to do my own thing, start my own company. And I thought that, originally I would work with larger clients. So today, the Marketing Zen Group, we work with clients across the board, Fortune 500, a lot of privately held middle market companies, fast-growing startups. But when I first started, I thought, oh yeah, these big companies, they're going to want to get on board. But the thing is, they weren't really willing then. They were more interested in keeping things status quo. Because remember, this is like the worst recession since the Great Depression, since 07, 08. And so they were really pulling back and said, we don't want to do anything that's new. We don't want to do anything that's risky that affects market share. And for for me, I was like, okay. But then on the flip side, you looked at small businesses who said, hey, if this gets customers in the door, I'm game. So our first clients were small businesses.
Very cool. So has that changed today? I mean, one of the big issues with kind of social media, digital marketing for like bigger companies is like, okay, how are we going to get our return on investment? How are we actually going to make money from this? Is that still an issue, or is it super easy to prove that, hey, if you invest this much money, you're going to get this much return?
Well, look, the ROI is definitely there. Otherwise, businesses wouldn't do it, right? That's more and more businesses are moving towards digital play. And the reason, the ROI is also there is because that's where the people are going. That's where audiences are. I will say that in some ways, we now have more metrics than ever before. I mean, you could never, the old joke was, marketing works, you just don't know which half of it works, right? Like, you just don't know which 50% is working. Well, today we definitely can sense what's working and what's not, but it's not a linear equation. It's not like, I think people used to think, okay, if you do A, it results in B, and marketing doesn't work that way. It's not it's not point A to point B. It's more complex than that, right? It's, for example, the last time you decided to go see a movie, how did you make that decision, Tom? I mean, it's rare that someone says, oh, I saw this one trailer and then just decided to go see that movie. It's usually because a friend mentions it to you, or because, you then maybe read a tweet or read a review, but it may be 5 or 6 touch points before you decide that's what you want to go see. So then if I say, okay, so what really, what marketing worked? Well, all of it worked, and just in different ways. And so it's rare that it's that linear anymore of a measurement or metric.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about your book Momentum, because I know in the book you share a lot of different strategies that businesses can use to really, grow their business online with great marketing. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Momentum's interesting because I think to tell the story of Momentum, I almost have to tell the story of the Zen of Social Media Marketing, my first book, which actually just is went into its 4th edition as of yesterday. And the thing about that is I wrote it when there was so much demand. People were hungry to know how to use social media. How does this work? What do we do with it? How do I make sense of this all? So it really was a primer for how things were supposed, like how to make this work, like a tactical guide for social media. And when the book came out, it surprised me too that it's done so well. I mean, I guess in some ways because it was written to meet market demand, but what happens as an author, when your books does well, especially your first book, is immediately people say, when's your next book? Like that's the biggest question you get asked. Like, great stuff, I want more. What's next? So everyone starts asking you, what's your next book? But the thing is, I didn't want to write something for the sake of writing it. I didn't write the Zen that way. I wrote it because there was a demand. I wanted to meet it. That's the entrepreneur in me. So I didn't want to write something just, again, for the sake of writing it. And it took me, 3-4 years after Zen to start looking and saying, okay, people are now dealing with different issues. They're overwhelmed. They need a framework. How do I help them? And so Momentum came about because there was a need, right? There was a specific demand, and hence from that demand, this came about.
Gotcha. And so I know in the book you share like 5 different strategies people can use. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's 5. Yeah, it's 5 principles of Momentum that really, I think, again, it's not just digital marketing, but marketing in the digital age, right? Kind of like the ecosystem we live in. The first principle is agility through analytics, looking at numbers and not having sacred cows. So making your decisions based on the data that's available to you. Then you have customer focus, and customer focus not in a way of the customer's always right, but understanding how, focusing on what your brand means as a company is no longer the way to go, but much more, what does our doing business with us allow our customers to say about their personal brand? Right? Very, very different kind of question. We look at the customer journey and what that looks like. And the third is integration. How do you integrate physical and digital marketing? How do you, do it seamlessly? The fourth is content curation. So not just writing content or creating content, but how do you curate it? How do you be that filter or voice for your audience? How do you bring them the best of? And then the final one is cross-pollination. How do you, bring different ideas to the table, one from the other, to create something new? How do you stop looking in silos and are able to create something where, we're almost a new category, if you will? So that's cross-pollination. And those are the 5 principles the book really revolves around.
Very cool. So I know the first one, agility through analytics, right? The first time I installed, like Google Analytics on my website and looked at the numbers, it's like just overwhelming. So much data, so much information that I had no idea what to do with. So how do you take, all this new data that we now have and actually use it in a way that will actually make a difference?
Yeah, I think it starts with asking the right questions and then finding the data that helps you answer it, rather than, sometimes just throwing yourself in the data and saying, what can I see here? Because there's both ways are valid, right? When we work with clients, we look at tons of data to say, what do we learn from this? But it's also important to ask the right questions that the data can then answer for you. So very simple, you mentioned Google Analytics. 2 things on Google Analytics that people can look at. Your bounce rate. So bounce rate is how quickly someone leaves your site, hits the back button. If it's higher than 70%, for example, that means 7 out of 10 people are leaving your website right away. And either that means that you're not converting well on your actual site when they get there, or it's not the right traffic. You are driving the wrong type of traffic to your website. It's not qualified. Right? The other thing you can look at is how much traffic you're getting from mobile sources. If you're getting, more than half of your traffic from mobile sources, but you are, but your site's not mobile optimized, for example, then you're missing out half of your prospective audience.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Great. So what about customer focus? I mean, how can people use that?
Yeah, customer focus is really about, again, understanding your customer's brand, their personal brand, not just what does our brand say about us, but hey, what does engaging with our brand allow our customers to say about themselves?
Mm-hmm. And so can you give us like an example of some of your clients, how you actually use that to?
Yeah, actually, a really good example that I think a lot of people will be familiar with is the ALS, the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? Where people were dumping buckets of ice water on their head. It's funny because, had ALS gone out there and said, here's what we're trying to do, share this, whatnot, they would have gotten maybe 1/10 of the success that they had. But by understanding and engaging their audience into doing something that was fun, something that was a little out there, something that, really understood why people share, right? Kind of like human psychology, what makes someone showcase this, how can they tie what they're doing, their brand, into ALS and to supporting us. So that was a great example of customer-led.
Right, gotcha. So instead of just begging people for donations, they kind of created this event, right? This fun thing that people could do.
Yeah, and that they could engage in, right? Because if I did that, it said something about me. It said that I would be willing to be a little fun, that I could be a little goofy, but I still, I would be willing to inconvenience myself, right, for something I cared about, but not so much that it would be really hard for me to do. So they made it really accessible.
Mm-hmm, gotcha. So can every business do something like that, or is it just is it just kind of crowded now? Like, you can't just copy the ice bucket challenge for.
No, you know what? It's not about copying, but it's understanding that concept. So yes, every business can look at what does doing business with us allow our customers to say about themselves. Like, think about the local cupcakery, right? And how sometimes that can have a lot more fans and people who love it than like big corporate brands, because doing like business with the local cupcakery allows you to tell something about yourself. So if I love a local cupcakery, I'm like, oh, I love supporting local business. I love cupcakes. I love sharing cool things with my friends that I find in the city. It says more about me than it does about the business, but the business has to enable that, if that makes sense.
So what can the business actually do to enable that beyond just, having a great product and great service?
Right, it's kind of finding those ways where it ties into what they're offering, right? It's like, it's allowing them to showcase their own self-expression. I mean, think about how brilliant Facebook is at this. They've got that every time something's kind of special happens, they put together a video that lets you sort of see, what your friends have said and whatnot, and they let you kind of celebrate you, right? They understand that there's no ads there, there's no business there in that sense, but it makes a lot of sense because they're tying it into something greater. They're tying it into your brand.
Right. So they kind of create this personalized experience that's unique to the customer.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. So what about step 3?
Principle 3 is integration, right? And that's the sense of how can you combine physical and digital for a more seamless experience? Because businesses often look at things and are like, oh, that's digital. That's, traditional. But we as consumers, when we make decisions, we don't think about it as digital and traditional. We just think about, how do I make a decision, right? So understanding your customer buying journey and finding points where you can intersect what you're doing, that's key.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So can you give us an example of that with one of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've had a lot of success with is anytime our clients have trade shows and how we integrate digitally into their trade show presence. So for pre-trade show, we'll find people's Twitter handles who we know are attending. We'll engage with them beforehand. Actually on the show, we'll integrate, engage with people online as well as offline. So as they're actually out on the show floor meeting with people, the same thing's happening digitally, right? Thanks so much for stopping by. Hey, stop by booth XYZ. And then post following up, thanking people, sharing, lessons learned or whatever it may be. So it's really about, again, combining the physical and the digital.
That's such a great idea. Yeah. So if you're going to a trade show, look up everyone on Twitter beforehand, send them a tweet, send them a message, connect with them. And then when you get there, you meet them in person, you're like, oh, hey, you're that person on Twitter who sent me that message. Because totally. I bet no one else is doing that, right?
Very few people do, right? So yeah, it does. It's all about how do you allow yourself to stand out in a very crowded world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Are there any other cool tips you have for kind of connecting with people online and then, taking that relationship into the physical space?
Yeah, I would say, hashtags are a great way to do it. If you find it, even if you're not at a conference, for example, but you want to engage with people who are there, you can follow the hashtag. right? You can retweet things. You can say, oh my God, I really wanted to make this conference, but didn't. Oh, I see that you're, from Arizona. I'm going to be in Arizona next week. So you can build relationships like that, but you do have to take, a researched, personalized approach.
Absolutely. So you're not just spamming people, you're actually finding out about people, building relationships,
Exactly.
and doing
People
the
that you
research.
genuinely want to build a relationship with, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Very cool. And are there any other unique ways you found to kind of blend the physical and online space for marketing?
I mean, there's so many ways to do it. It really just, depends on your business, and it depends more on your goals, not necessarily. So that's one of the things, right? You don't want to force a fit. You don't want to say, oh, we have to do this. It's more, what are you trying to do? And then look at the options you have available to help accomplish that.
Right, totally. So I love that. I love your approach because it's really about understanding your own business and not just copying what other people are doing, not just saying, oh, this strategy worked for someone else, so we're going to do that, but really looking at your business and saying, okay, what are our unique strengths? What are our unique values that we bring to the table? And how can we communicate that better with our customers?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Very cool.
Thank you.
So let's talk about principle 4 then.
So, content curation, it's funny. It's actually exactly what you're doing, where it's not just about how much content can you create, because we always hear this content is king and you got to create content and brands have to create more and more. But this is more about, it's not just about creating stuff. It's about providing useful, valuable information to your audience. And so think about what you're doing, right? This kind of Google Hangout that we're doing when we're recording, where this is you curating information that you think your audience will find helpful and useful.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's not necessarily about what comes out of your mind or what you're creating. It's how can you be the filter to bring sort of the best of for your audience.
Absolutely. So what are some other ways you found is a great way to bring the best of information to different types of businesses?
Well, you have to know your audience for sure, right? I mean, think about a couple of examples. Pinterest. Pinterest is the ultimate content creation platform. It's funny because they don't have a product or service. Like their service, if you will, is just it's really just to allow people to share images, to be able to curate. And so, for example, if you run an interior design firm, you have a Pinterest board that showcases your inspiration, your best work. Like, what better way can you think of than than that, right? And then if someone discovers that, it's like, oh, I really like this person's style. That's who I want to work with.
Gotcha. Great. So that's a great example for like interior designers. So like if you can create a great Pinterest board that's beautiful, that highlights your work and does it in a really beautiful way, you can bring like your iPad or computer to presentation for the client and show them, here's what we've done, here's our work.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a really unique way.
People can discover you, right? So if you have, for example, you love the Mediterranean style and that's your style of design, then you can create these boards that focus on that, right? Curate sort of best of information in that way, and then people will discover you who are interested in that.
Absolutely. Have you found any cool ways to kind of take something like a Pinterest board or something you've curated and really get it out to more people? Because it's you can create something on your blog and doesn't mean a lot of people are actually going to see it though.
Yeah, I mean, curation is a couple of things. One, you have to understand your audience. And then the other thing, it's funny, this is the number one, I think, mistake people make in marketing in general, is a lack of consistency. Whatever you do, you have to do it consistently. It's rare that you'll say, oh, I set up a Pinterest board and it's got a couple of pictures and yeah, that's it, and it doesn't work that way. It's really about doing something consistently that helps build your brand and visibility.
Right, that's a great point. Yeah, because if you're just like that designer who has one cool Pinterest board, that's all right. But if you're that designer who has Pinterest board after Pinterest board after Pinterest board, that's amazing, that people love, then people are really going to talk about it and share it much more.
And that you're consistently doing whatever it is that your audience appreciates, sure.
Absolutely, very cool. All right, so let's talk about the last principle, principle 5.
Cross-pollination is this idea that you can't see things in silos and that you have to be able to pick different ideas from various areas internally and externally, right? And what I mean by that is you have to be able to look at the broader picture. For example, your employees can be your best source for sharing information, for getting social media, posts shared, for distribution. But so many people don't think about it that way. They're like, oh, there are employees. That's not, but your employees can be your best marketing force.
Totally. So how do you actually engage employees to do that? I mean, it sounds like kind of an awkward conversation could be.
I mean, it's not that you're forcing anyone to do anything. It's all about giving people choices, right? So for example, with one of our clients, we were creating a lot of content for them already. And what they wanted was to be able to, and they had a team, their team was eager to share, but they were busy or for whatever reason, didn't know everything that we were doing. So we started an internal newsletter for their team that had, here's what we're creating, ready to go tweets, ready to go LinkedIn updates. And all they had to do was copy, paste, and share. And it was a win-win because it provided, value to their professional network. It made them stand out as professionals, and it was great for the company.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Great. That's a great point. So basically just taking content you've already created, right? You're already creating all this content for the company, but all the employees weren't necessarily in the loop. And it's not like you're going to have like a company-wide meeting like, hey, here's the newest tweet we have, right? But just by sending that quick email, that quick note out to people to give them the information, it made it really easy for them to share it.
Right. And they know and they understand, what they have access to, like what's going on. And again, it's a win-win because they don't have to share everything. They don't have to share anything. Usually people will share certain things that, make sense, and they choose their platform. So if it's like, oh, Facebook's for friends and family, I don't ever really put anything work-related, but great, I'm happy to share it on LinkedIn. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So, when I think of cross-pollination, a lot of times I think about, sharing ideas, not just within the company, but outside the company as well. Is that something that you also work on?
Oh, totally. Like one of our clients, for example, wanted to start a social presence and they didn't have anything, but they were an established company. And so the traditional play would be to do a lot of ad buys to drive, social engagement. And we were like, how can we get more creative here? And one of the things we realized is they were a manufacturer and had great relationships with their retailers. And these retailers had massive social presence already. So we said, hey guys, would you want to cross promote? Because guess what? They're buying the product in your store and we're trying to get our social presence up so we can we can serve our customers better and have a better pulse on what they're interested in and engage with and so forth. And they loved the idea. I mean, they loved the idea, and the retailer said, oh, wow, no one's ever approached us for this before, right? So with that, we were able to get 20,000 fans very quickly without a lot of ad spend at all because we were able to leverage current existing resources.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. It's amazing the power of just asking someone for a simple thing like that.
Yes, you do have to ask.
Right. Totally. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think, a big issue I've seen with a lot of entrepreneurs is that they're not willing to ask. Like they're afraid. They go, oh, I don't want to reach out to this person or that business or ask them to do this because, it might hurt our relationship or what are they going to think about me? But you're never going to grow if that's your mindset. If you're not willing to go out there.
You have to make sure it's a valuable ask, right? You're not asking them something that, in this case, it's a win-win. So you are asking things of value, and it wasn't just a, hey, can you send traffic our way? It's no, they're buying the product in your store. So it was really a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very cool. Well, Shama, when I started studying, social media marketing like years ago, it was like Facebook, it was Twitter, it was LinkedIn, and that was pretty much it. But now we have like Instagram and Musical.ly and, all these new ones. Is that, the trend that you're seeing in the industry right now is the future of social media marketing? You have to be on 10 or 20 different platforms, or, where should your focus really be?
Yeah, I think there'll always be more platforms. Things will come and go. That I'm convinced of. I think what's more important is people realize the bigger shift that's happened. And this idea that people are the media and how we create content now, how we share it. We are all, we all have our personal brands now. We all have a digital footprint. Every brand has one. So it's sort of thinking in that broader way about social media, not so much social media as Twitter or Facebook or Musical.ly, but social media more as in the fact that people are the media, and how do you leverage that to help further your goals?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So can you give us kind of an example of like how you would go about brainstorming that for, like a campaign for a new company that doesn't have any social media presence right now? And what kind of research would you do? What kind of questions would you ask to find out, which channels would be best for them and what kind of strategy would be best for them?
Yeah, you really, when a client comes to us, we do a lot of research to figure out where's their audience at. For example, if it's a very visual thing, then Instagram obviously comes to mind. If they're aiming for a very young audience, 18 to whatever, Snapchat's what we want to look at. So it is based on doing your research and looking at numbers, and that information is available. So it is about knowing your audience. And if you're B2B, LinkedIn obviously is a great one.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And so, what would your advice be to someone who maybe just a solo entrepreneur, a small business owner just starting out, doesn't have a huge budget in terms of focus? So like after you do your research, you find out, okay, maybe Instagram's the best channel for us. Does that mean you ignore those other channels, or that like what kind of process would you go through with that?
Well, I think it depends on your resources, right? if your resources are limited, I would much rather you choose a platform where your audience is and do a great job than try to do 4 or 5 channels and it's all kind of scattered.
Totally. Makes a lot of sense. So really just focus on and make sure you're doing something that's really quality.
Yeah, and if you obviously have the resources and the ROI is there, then ideally, yes, you are on all the platforms your audience is on.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, Shama, if you had to kind of go back, to an earlier version of yourself when you were just starting your social media marketing business, what advice would you give yourself?
Think bigger. I think bigger. It's funny because so many of the things we even started then, I wish that I had thought about like spinning off into their own companies and so forth, because the things that we were doing for clients or even kind of in-house platforms we were using, we could have totally siphoned them and made them much bigger standalone platforms.
So think bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Great advice. Well, Shama, it's been a pleasure interviewing you. You shared a ton of great information with us, and I really appreciate it. And I know that folks would love to connect with you. So can you share where people can learn about you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a pleasure, Tom. You can go to marketingzen.com. Lots of resources there, as well as shamahyder.com. You can connect with me on all the social sites through there. And of course, check out Momentum. It's now in bookstores, as is the Zen of Social Media Marketing in its 4th edition, and bookstores all over the country, as well as Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shama.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.